After a heady experience of that kind, normally sensible people drift into behaviour akin to that of Cinderella at a ball. Overstaying the festivities, he remarked, will eventually bring on pumpkins and mice. Many chastised Buffett for his gloomy commentary and his ominous warnings of a bubble about to burst. The champions of dot-com companies claimed that Berkshire Hathaway's chairman, a well-known technophobe, would miss out on the oceans of profit that stood to be made. For a while, the markets agreed. In the late 1990s, the company's shares fell, but Buffett remained steadfast, adding a mid-sized energy supplier and a furniture rental business to his company's portfolio, further reinforcing the market's perception that he was a Luddite. Drawing parallels between his pessimistic prophecies and those of Cassandra, investors dubbed Buffett the Wall Street Cassandra. Of course, the markets did eventually pop, with the previously dismissive investors, and not Buffett, suffering the reputational damage. Their Wall Street Cassandra sneer proved unwise. In the long term, it also turned out to be inaccurate. Ultimately, Buffett was publicly vindicated and his credibility soared to a level that has remained largely untouched ever since. He ceased to carry the curse of the Wall Street prophet who goes unheeded in their own lifetime. That dubious distinction belongs elsewhere, to a true victim of the Cassandra complex, whose name almost no one would have heard of, had it not been for the investigative skills of the savvy journalist Michael Lewis. The real Wall Street Cassandra was a man named Michael Burry, who was born in New York in 1971. He studied medicine at the University of California, Los Angeles, before earning his MD in Nashville, Tennessee. While working as a resident at Stanford, he found time to start his own hedge fund and quickly developed an aptitude as a shrewd and successful investor. In 2001, shortly after the dot-com bubble burst, the S&P 500 fell almost 12%. That year, Burry's investments were up more than 50%. Beginner's luck, maybe? Yet the following year, when the S&P fell by 22%, Burry returned more than 15%. And even when the stock market began to register a positive turn in 2003, Burry beat the markets hands down by 50% to 28%. During the mid-2000s, Burry shifted his investment focus. He started taking positions against subprime mortgage bonds at a time when there was no formal way to bet against them. He had to invent his own method. Burry's genius lay in spotting the under-recognized, perilous fault lines underpinning the subprime mortgage market and shorting them. The message he seemed to be sending to the market was one of an impending apocalypse. It was a message that seemed credible and evidence-based, and it was made with conviction. Burry had skin in the game. He was putting his own money on the line. Who knew that Burry's astute and perceptive insights would turn out to be the early predictors of what ultimately became the biggest financial crisis in more than 70 years? Very few, in fact. In contrast to those late 1990s investors who heard but dismissed Warren Buffett's forewarnings, Burry's prophecy simply wasn't heard. Not by the media, not by the financial in-crowd. Next to no one was listening. Arguably, it was even worse for Burry than it had been for his classical forebear. Cassandra's single great obstacle was an inability to convince anyone of her prophecies. Burry faced other disadvantages too. He was an awkward communicator. He also had only one eye, having lost the other when he was barely 2 years old because of a tumour. This physical drawback made simple face-to-face conversations difficult because, in his attempt to line up his good eye, Burry's glass one would appear strangely skewed. This awkwardness had dogged him throughout school and college, where he had made few friends. The fact was that Burry was seen as different. At school, at college, as a resident at Stanford Hospital, and when he arrived on Wall Street, he even dressed differently. In contrast to the industry norms of tailored suits, starched shirts, and Windsor-knotted ties, Burry wore shorts and t-shirts to work. Years after the crash, and despite his fund having made a gross gain of 726%, Burry's entirely accurate prophecy remained